If they're showing you a dog park and you don't have a dog, it's like you feel like you're paying for more than what you actually need. And even though everything else might be perfect, it makes you feel like you're actually not a great fit.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to episode 36 of Sales Stories in Real Life. This is the show where professional salespeople share their stories on memorable buying experiences. Today, we've got a very special guest. He is a 4 times President's Club winner at only 26 years old. He was recently promoted to mid-market AE at Gong. Welcome to the show, Mr. Brian LaManna. I'm super excited for this one. This has got to be one of the most relatable buying experiences that anybody could learn from. And I heard you had a real memorable experience when you were finding an apartment. What happened there, Brian?
Yeah. First off, Alex, pumped to be on the show. 36 episodes. That's crazy, man. Excited. I've been a fan for a while and excited to get to share the buying experience side of things as well and actually be a part of the story. But yeah, I think for all the folks out there, moving absolutely sucks. There's no way to go about it. And my lease was actually up in April. So actually just a couple weeks from now. So started looking for different apartments about a month ago. And as a buyer, what you do is you first do some research, right? So as a buyer myself, I went online, did some Google searches, did some review searches as well around the different places, asked friends, asked people I knew, and kind of narrowed it down to a search of 3 to 4 different places before I wanted to start touring and going through that process. What I found in the past from moving around to different apartments in Chicago and even the first couple I looked at were oftentimes, and it's funny being on the buyer side of things, but you show up to one of those appointments and they start walking you through every single feature and every single place. You just get there right on time. They shake your hand, walk up to the exact unit, and they talk through every single specific thing in there, most of which, candidly, I don't care about as a buyer, right? There were only a couple things I was really looking for that were absolutely most important. So those were some of the experiences I've had in the past. Of course, not everyone's like that out there as well, but it was really cool to have a tremendous experience as well. And just felt like they really knew what we were looking for and what we needed out of a place.
I love it, man. So let's dive into it because this is not only relatable from a perspective of everyone needs an apartment and everyone needs a place to live, but you just nailed the modern buying experience. People most of the time aren't reaching out to you for a full A to Z of everything, right? A lot of people are coming across and they might be 70% of the way there. They might be 90% of the way there. They might be 40% of the way there. But we're in the age of the internet, right? Everyone can go and look up online for what they want. So this is a real relevant experience, I would say, because of that, is because you did a whole bunch of research beforehand. You're from Chicago. It's not like you're new to the area and need a whole like grand tour of like, oh, where should I live? You kind of had it narrowed down to 3-4 places already. So what happened when you went and met the agent?
Yeah, I think that's super well said. And yeah, it's like when it makes you feel like at some of the places, if they don't understand what you want, if they're showing you a dog park and you don't have a dog, it's like you feel like you're paying for more than what you actually need. And even though everything else might be perfect, it makes you feel like you're actually not a great fit. So in this great experience, to the contrary, we walked in. Immediate warmness, immediate friendliness, knew the name right away of myself and my girlfriend who were going through the touring and said, hey, Brian, hey, Charlotte, is that you? Just kind of confirming with us. Immediate warm smile, handshake, things like that, and started asking us about the previous weekend, what we did for St. Patrick's Day out in Chicago, things of that nature. And actually, before we even walked into the unit that we set up and came inbound for in a way, he just asked to kind of get to know us and asked what was most important for us in a place that we were looking for. And actually led to a really good, like 5 to 7 minute conversation on a couple key things we're looking for. We're actually both work from home, right? So it's really important to have not just an office space, but have a little bit extra room in the common area that we'd be able to fit a desk in. So help kind of guide and like showcase exactly what he would be able to showcase and highlight versus some of the extra stuff that wasn't mission critical for us, we'll say.
Man, I love the example that you gave. Like, don't show people a dog park if they don't have a dog, right? Then you feel like you're paying for more than you need, and now you're uncertain, right? Like you don't know. And that dog park can exist, by the way, right? Like if you found out about that dog park a couple weeks later, you wouldn't care. But like talk to people about what they care about. Hey, we need some extra space in the living room. We need an extra office space. And what's really great about all of this is that it led to a great conversation. But he was starting off with, what'd you do for St. Patrick's Day? Right? Like, oh, hey, St. Patrick's Day was recent, that was fun, right? Like, what'd you do for St. Patrick's Day? Right? Like, get a feel of what you guys were doing, right? If you're saying, hey, we were at the bars all day, we were doing this and that, like, then he knows, okay, right? I'm probably going to talk about how close this is to downtown and how much stuff there is close by. And if you're like, hey, we just had a real quiet day, then he knows, okay, I got to talk about the building's nice and quiet. You'll get to do this and that. So
Yeah.
what was some of the things that were going through your head during that discovery, right? Like not just, hey, here's the tour, here's the place, but like let's start about what you care about first, and then let's reverse engineer from there. What's going through your head as a buyer in that moment?
Yeah, I really like the approach. I think it felt different to me, at least in terms of that type of experience. And it felt like we were being heard and being listened to because we have come up with our own set of criteria before we even came to that conversation, right? We came inbound in a way to them. So it showed that we had intent, that we had interest. And there were a couple of like must-haves, the in-unit washer dryer, just the basic amenities and things like that were super important in terms of the check the box stuff. So just taking that time and space to feel heard, I think was really important. And I think it's interesting too, because he knew exactly what was most important to us, the actual tour part was pretty short. It was pretty concise, just showed us exactly those areas. Hey, is this what you're looking for? Does this exceed your expectations? Versus the other ones, even though we saved the 5 minutes up front because there was a full harbor tour and showing everything and every capacity of the amenity floor and things like that nobody ends up using. It ended up actually being longer. So I thought that was an interesting takeaway as well from just taking a little bit of time up front and getting to know everything that was most important.
That's huge. I love that. I love that. Like people would rather spend time talking about themselves and what they're looking for and what's important to them rather than just touring for no apparent reason, like just to show the artificial waterfall in the front, right? Like who cares? So that's incredibly relevant, especially to tech sellers, right? Because most platforms out there could do 2 million and one things, but pick the things that they care about and make the conversation focused on that, right? So a lot of great takeaways to draw out of there. You guys kind of came in with a list of what you wanted already. So how did that go? Was there something where you guys were like looking for something and there was a moment of like, hey, well, actually, maybe you should consider this instead, or I guess, was there any kind of like challenging involved of like, oh, hey, I know you didn't mention this, but like, this is also really cool? Or was it just kind of like, hey, I understand exactly what you want. Here it is. What do you think? How did that kind of go?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think it was interesting too, since in this case, right, had two different buyers from his perspective. He had myself and then my girlfriend as well, who I'm moving in with. And of course, just even as two different buyers, even though to them it might just be one sale, it's catering to two different types of audiences. I cared about a couple things in particular that were most important to me. She cared about different aspects as well. So I mean, ahead of time, what me and my girlfriend did were just kind of put our heads together off of some of those like must-have criteria. Which neighborhood we're in Chicago. A couple basics when it comes to the apartment and the security of it and things like that. That for us were deal breakers per se. So just came in really prepared, which I think more buyers, as we kind of relate this to the greater theme of selling and SaaS as well, there's a lot of research out there online. There's different reviews. There's even Reddit, threads and things of that nature. So people are coming in with more knowledge than ever before. And it's important to meet them where they're at as well, as a buyer.
That's key. don't reinvent the wheel, right? Like you don't have to go over things that people already know. And to your point, you already knew what neighborhood you wanted. You already kind of knew the big sort of deal breaker items. And I mean, once again, we can go back to tech where, well, sales in general, B2B sales in general, where you want some things and your girlfriend wants some other things, right? Like you might have procurement on the call, you might have a sales leader on the call, you might have a marketing leader on the call, right? Like you don't want to talk to the other person about what they don't care about. So you've got to be able to kind of navigate those conversations and make sure that you're checking all the boxes along the way. That's obviously incredibly relevant to B2B selling. And we do have a lot of B2B sellers that are listening right now. Brian, what would be a big takeaway that you'd give to them? Obviously, you've had a lot of success. You're at an awesome company in Gong. You've made President's Club 4 times. You're a young dude. So obviously you're on a great path here. What would be some of the big takeaways that you'd give for those that are listening?
Yeah, I would say be like Christian was, who is our agent today, walking through it. And I think from that end, it's the little things that can set us apart as sellers. It's not just that actual walkthrough or that demo. It's everything that happens leading up to it, both before we get there in the first place, and then once the conversation starts. So for me as a seller at Gong, like one of the main things I take pride in is my preparation when it comes to every call. Like I spend a good minimum 20 minutes, typically closer to 30 minutes. Like I want to learn everything about their company, about their business before they get on a Zoom with me. I want to know their CEO's name. I want to know if they're private or public, who they're funded by. I want to know their strategic initiatives. I want to know if they've come up in the news recently on Google. I have a whole checklist that I'm going through because I want to impress them from the beginning. First impressions, right? Whatever the stat is, are made in, we'll just say, a very short amount of time. And I want to come in ready, making them feel heard and making them feel like I am there to support them in every way possible. And I really take a lot of that preparation. And I feel like that earns my right to do really strong discovery upfront and ask those tough, thought-provoking questions to learn and dig in even deeper on some of what I learned, right? Showing up with that perspective or that POV and digging a little bit deeper on it, to learn more from their world. But those are the things I really do differently as a seller. And I think there's so much information for us as well as sellers out there online more than ever before. And if it's out there online, like I'll just say, like you're expected to know that coming into a conversation, especially if it's an important call, a big deal. You've got someone in C-suite or something. Show up prepared or don't show up at all.
I love that. Walk us through that if you don't mind, because obviously you're in a space with competitors, right? You're selling a more premium product, so you got to really be sharpened, in what you're bringing to the table. So like, what does that sound like, right? Like you don't want to start off a call and like, hey, I saw you went to, University of blah blah blah, right? Like my cousin did too. It's like, no, that's trash. What does that kind of sound like at the beginning of a call, right? Like when you're letting them know, like, hey, I did my research. I understand what you're going through and I speak your language. What does that sound like?
Yeah. I'll be the first to admit it too. I didn't always do what I'm going to share I did. I think I've evolved and continued to grow as a seller. I think what I used to do, which I think is like a B, is showing up to the call and saying, hey, Alex, like, as blank leader, like talk to me about your top 2 to 3 priorities. I think that's an okay question. It's good, but I don't know if you're really going to feel compelled to then share everything that's eating away at your mind and in the conversations in the boardroom with this sales rep you just met on a virtual Zoom call that you know nothing about. So instead, what I try to do is actually insert a lot of that preparation into my first question so that I can earn a little bit of that trust up front. So what that might sound like out in the wild is I'll say, hey, Alex, I saw you just joined 4 months ago. You're the new chief revenue officer. And I saw online that we just rolled out this new feature that's supposed to be a game changer in the market. And you also brought on a new sales director just a month ago. Other revenue leaders I've spoken to in your shoes tell me that XYZ is most top of mind. Is that the case with you, or does anything trump that in terms of an even bigger priority for you today?
That's so crispy and so nuanced because even on top of all the prep that you did at the beginning, I love what you did at the end too. Is that the biggest priority or is there anything else? Right. So, like, you're acknowledging, hey, I did my research and I know this is important and I'm showing you that I know what I'm talking about. But maybe is there anything bigger? Right. And you're just kind of giving them a thread to pull on. And a question like that, you're going to get a story, right? Like, as a salesperson, you don't want to get those yes or no questions, right? It's like, oh, is this a priority? Yes. And it's just a stagnant conversation. You want people to expand, right? You want people to be honest. You want them to peel back that onion and really, like you said, get into those things that they're talking about in the boardroom behind your back, that they're up at night, right? And they're worrying about. They're not just going to give that right off of the bat to you, like taking candy from a baby, right? Like, you've got to earn the right to ask those questions.
Well, 100%. And you just did it to me in a previous question, but it was like, hey, tell me more about that. Once you're a little bit down that funnel, you can just show your genuine curiosity and you can ask a short, little, concise follow-up question to go deeper and deeper. But to your point, like, even after we start talking about a priority for a little bit, one of my favorite questions is just to quickly pause and say, like, hey, Alex, this seems like a super massive bet for 2023. Just quick gut check me, like, does anything trump this as an even larger priority today? Or are we like, is this the number one thing that we have to nail? And you have two great outcomes. Either they say, no, that is the number one thing. We have to nail this today. You get their buy-in around why now, or you uncover something totally that wasn't on your radar that might be even larger, that wasn't out there on Google or the POV that you showed up with, and you have a new discussion around that as well. So it's really either outcome tends to be pretty good.
That's fucking awesome. I mean, because then you just keep pulling that thread, right? Like, you just keep finding thing after thing after thing. And what you don't even notice that you're doing is you're talking about them the whole time, right? That's the key, is like, you're talking about them. Oh, and what about this? And what about this? And then they're just talking, right? And you're just sitting back and you're doing the listening and you're gathering your ammo, you're building your business case, you're hearing out of their mouths what actually really matters to them. That is the kind of questioning that will get you to President's Club 4 times, man. That's absolutely brilliant.
Yeah. And I'll amplify the call out you mentioned in that as well, that like that whole conversation is not about my product. It's not about my features. It's not about, no, I work at Gong. I didn't just mention we record calls, or this is how we transcribe them with natural language processing. Like, that's cool to me. That's not cool to them. Like, they're focused about their world. They want to open up in their realm. And as long as you've been able to earn that, you should be able to keep the conversation for at least that first 10 to 15 critical minutes in discovery, whatever that looks like in your world as a seller. You should be able to keep that 90% about them and 10% about you. And if they do ask, oh, how does that relate to Gong? I'll just kind of defer it and be like, there's a lot of ways. I actually have a couple other ideas. Like, do you mind if I ask just like 2 short questions before we dive in? So just getting their buy-in again to just continue on, because the second you turn the conversation about you and your product, it's usually a rabbit hole, at least what I found, where then they have follow-up questions for you. Right? You gave your 30-second elevator pitch and like, well, how do you do that? Wait, what about in this situation? And then, not the point of discovery.
Man, and it goes back to your apartment experience too, where you went in there and he took the first 5-7 minutes and then you're touring really fast, right? Because you already know what you're looking for, you already know what you want. When you have someone who's telling you their problems and you're just pulling that thread and pulling that thread, and maybe they're talking about their problems for 15 minutes, you don't have to go into, oh, well, Gong, we do that, and show Gong's 5,000 features. You go in and say, hey, you just told me that you care about XYZ. Here's how you do it, right? And then that demo is 10 times better than a demo where you showed every single feature for 30 minutes and think that you wowed them, but they were just like snoozing the whole time, versus like you really, really, really dug into that main initiative and just showed how you could solve it. And simply that is a 10 times better demo than the latter.
Exactly. Yeah. It's crisp demos, and it's showcasing exactly what they need to see. Nothing more and nothing less. Just exactly.
Don't show the dog park to people who don't have a dog park. Dude,
Yeah.
so many good clips that we're going to grab from this. Brian, this has been an absolute blast. We've been overdue for this too, but that's not for the folks listening. That's for us two to work on.
It
But
is.
man, you're working on a bunch. Know you're going to Fiji for President's Club. That's going to be awesome. Safe travels. Why don't you tell us a little about what you're doing before we jump?
Yeah, sure. So it's super excited for Fiji, by the way. Not excited for all the travel that comes with it. Did not realize there's about 20 hours of flights, but that's champagne problems. We'll leave it at. But overall, I actually just started posting on LinkedIn last July, so I'm coming up on about 9 months of being active on social media. But definitely recommend connecting with me there. And I write a newsletter as well outside of that weekly, just with one piece of actionable sales advice, and I keep it really concise, really tight, solve exactly what you need, nothing more, nothing less. And I'll leave it at that. But two great resources to check out for anyone trying to up level their game.
Find Brian on LinkedIn. Highly recommend the follow. You're telling great sales stories, not like these sales stories that are buyer stories. You're telling great selling stories that are really actionable. Go check out the newsletter. You've heard how he pitches. You know there's not going to be garbage in that newsletter. Brian, this has been an absolute blast. Thanks so much for the time.
Pleasure is mine. Thanks, Alex.
See you next week, Sales Stories in Real Life, fan. Cheers.